Kaya yuxatini to cut you on. Gulchish wuchin khasati. Ye awa adat you tuchwatunk when qanins. Chagu qaq qanachawi. Qajaq te. Du inuch akhwatanen. This tlelkadin na yakhasakukwa. Yahayukatangi wega. Kakhwa aqqa. Tlachlakudzi qa qastin. Qastin qa qalqaw qa qajaqti. Ujin khaswustien. Qawe wasaq tuosaguan. Jahastu khankhichat wutin. Washyatayach achtendataniach. Helwasaq patiqa. Ja, hast du yukatangi teen. Stuchel tu. Ade aya you haskawl atganya. Ja, ach tu asagu hast du yachraya. Yukagachtu tlaad. Ja, khana tu kagachtu ach we. Chakuta drills ka. Yatetsu. Shuk. Or like a shuk. At shuk. A yawashuk. Or like, yeah, at shuk. Ashuk. At shuk. Ayashuk. Atyashuk. Ka. Akawashuk. Akawashuk. Ya owa. Atshuk yukatangi. Ya tagtahin o khalakach. Giwadaki hiti itwu good. Ya owa. Like. Ya owa achtuasagu. Atata ya yukagachtu tlaad. Ilchishu han. Yakaya ye hawutian tliatke. Gwell ituasagu yukayatani. Gug. Gwell ituasagu. Yukayawusi. Gwell shukwa. Great to see everybody. Anybody got any language questions while we start? Anything you've been thinking about?
Kone,
Ah,
if I want to say that's all I know, would that be tlech kwasaku hooch or hooch tlech kwasaku?
I'd probably say, well, I guess there's a couple. I remember I heard an elder one time, he was talking and he said, Yewe kwasaku. Catch the cut that kwasaku. He said, that's how I know it. I don't know everything. But you could say, well, that's a good question. Because hooch away. Yeah, dasa kwasaku ada. Like that's the end of what I know about it. No, but it sort of sounds like what I know about it is all gone. So it might be sort of like you might say just yata oe ye oe hwasaku ada. Teshta satsuk. Maybe something like that. That is what I know about it, not anything more. Or you might say ye we. I remember one time a speaker was talking and they said ye we ye kugeach yukatangi. That's how big my speech is. So maybe yeah, I'll have to see. That's a good question. Anybody got any other thoughts? Huh? That's
I
all.
have a question. The other night when you were giving us words of comfort before you started the recording, the one about I'm starting to like the riverbank.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that was what the old folks would say when they knew their time was near, their time to go. And then you gave the explanation that that's what the salmon do when they're ready to spawn and leave and die. And I thought that was like a thunderbolt thing of indigenous science. And I was wondering if you can recall where that is said. Is it in a story? Or
No, that was, I don't know if it was ever recorded, but that was Achtakashu, Joe Hodge. He said it to us at a meeting. And then it was one of those things where I was listening, and then I listened to the Shinget, and I listened to the translation. This was probably 18 years ago, maybe. And then I was trying to, then it came to mind, and I remember I'd probably talked to him about it since then. But then I can't remember who helped me. Maybe it was Justina. But someone went to him and got the phrase. No, it was oh, what's that do a sako? Silaska heritage iniji wanayan. Hotch.
Christina, I
Stina.
mean Katrina.
Katrina, yeah, oh,
Yeah.
Jade.
Uh,
But she found it in her notes and maybe even a recording of it somewhere. I can't, but yeah, so she confirmed it because I was just asking around, like, anybody else hear him say that? I didn't hear him say,
uh,
yeah,
that was like magnificent indigenous science.
yeah,
I think I have a recording of him explaining in English, but I don't know if he said it in Tlingit, and I keep looking for that recording, but he was concerned about the motorboats on the river washing off the marking that the fish had made by chewing on the riverbank.
wow,
Uh,
goodness, sheesh. Yeah, and so like I was trying to get this too. Whoops, where the you guys went over this side, okay. Um, so on the land side, there's Hin Yach, which is alongside the river. Hin Ayach, which is where the river touches the land. And Yach is along the edge of something. Works really well for uh, bodies of water. And it's also how you would talk about being around a table. Hin or Nadak Yach Qaike. Sit around the table. Uh, and then you have Hin Yik, which is sort of the surface level. And then you have Hin Tak, which is all the way down to the bottom, which means anything deep enough to submerge all the way to the bottom. And you could say Tukka to say very much like just right on the bottom, Tukka. And then Hin One is the riverbank from the water side. So that's why you would say Dehwatuk Hin One. I've already started biting the riverbank. So day, like so, once we know how to do a perfective, you can put day in front of it to say it already happened, right? For example, Mr. Know-it-all whips out this river thing. And like, did you know this is Heen 1? Deosaku. You already knew it. So it works really well. But you could also say like, De atwacha. I already ate. Like someone's offering you. Careful with that one. If you're in their house and they offer you food, eat the food. Like it's in Hawaii. And like someone was rejecting food, like, oh, no, I'm okay. And it was really uncomfortable because we walked in like some snack store and they had like bags of dried shrimp and just all kinds of like cool like very Hawaiian type of foods. And someone was just like, oh wow, that looks interesting. So someone bought it for him because they said, oh well, you pointed at it, so I'll be a good host and buy it for you.
oh.
He said, no, no, I don't want it. And then it was just I was like, what are you doing? So and then later like things went worse and we got yelled at and someone said, you allergic to the peanut, you eat the peanut. So but if someone offers you food just like casually, you could say de atwacha. I already ate something. So de before a verb means already. And there is a difference. I haven't quite parsed it out. I don't know if anybody has any opinions on it. De scotch is a little bit different. For me, like Uh, the way I think of these is so you'd say day perfective verb already happened, right? But it's not that big it's not really communicating much more than that. They squatch, I think, would be like I came over for dinner and they were already eating, right? So it's a little bit more of a bigger, there's a little bit more substance to it. When you get into the Raven stories, you see it all over the place. And it's like they squatch, and it's like it had already happened and it's kind of a big deal. Um, like I think it implies like maybe you're late there, or maybe, they squatch pone hasiuch outla at chitlaya hiki. They had already started talking before I got there, by the time when I walked in the house. So for me, it implies something a little bit more like it's just a big deal that has started. I don't know. It's worth checking out. Um, but that is immediately before the verb. And like I guess on a similar sort of path, you have Yesu. So it sure seems to me like a Yesu verb just now started that verb, right? Just now verbing. But verb Yesu still verbing. I guess I should. We've done enough that I better make a note.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, you like to do songs, so I guess still crazy after all these years would be Shkahati Yesu Chagutach, maybe. Okay, what's your question?
Um, I was doing in Clinket the 23rd Psalm, and I ran into "He restoreth my soul." So I looked up "restore." First, I couldn't find "restore," but then I found it, and it has these 3 two-syllable verb stems, each end in an.
Mm-hmm.
Yasihanan, Yasinagan, and Yayachichen.
Mm.
And it's confusing how to say "He restores my soul." So what I came up with was Achtuwa, for my soul. And that's really close to what they use for Yesihanan, Tuch. Same with Yesinagan, Tuch Yesinagan, Tuch Yesihanan. And then restored to normality, Ach Yachichen. And I was wondering, number one, how do you conjugate any of those 2-syllable verbs? And number two, which one would be the right way to say "He restoreth my soul"?
Yeah, well, that's a good. He returns, right? He part two. Like I guess the Halloween horror movies, there's always got to be part two. So it's like Return of the He. So as the He comes back. So let's see. Let me pull up something here. That's a good question. Okay. So what you're looking at here is a verb suffix. So there are some verb suffixes that we're going to end up using, and I do think they aren't used as often as prefixes. Like we're always doing the prefix stuff, right? Perfective, future, hortative, like that's all going to be prefix stuff, right? And then the stem. So we're always like prefix stem, prefix stem, prefix stem, right? And same with when you're talking about who's doing it and to whom. But there are some things uh, that can go into the suffix. And I think the ones that we will end up sort of learning about and holding on to and using quite a bit I'll start with cha. So cha can go on anything that you're like shooting or trying to hit something. It means to miss. So you could say like awa unt would be I shot at it. Awa un would be I shot it. And or sorry, chua, I should be saying chua unt, chua un, and then chua uncha, I shot and missed. So there are some of these things that can be done with a suffix. And so the actual conjugation of the verb isn't, it still won't affect. Like you could say, right? Aqqa'un, they're gonna shoot at it. But you could say aqqa'uncha, they're gonna miss. So you can, it doesn't change like what's going on in the prefix, I don't think, with that one. And I think we're seeing the same thing with this one. So aq is another one that we're going to see, and it is in yaqquhe yaqu, for that is the word for, I think that the spirit, that the level that is usually being talked about in terms of religious texts, right? So you do have a tuwu, but your tuwu is like your emotions and your intentions, that sort of side. It's like the conscious spirit. Yakquaheyaku is the spirit that exists in all things, and that when you expire, it's the thing that leaves. Tuwu is often associated with intentions and thoughts, and so like sheqeyak means to remove the meat of a mollusk, because you open the shell and it's qey between the folds of it, sheqeyak, pulling it out from the folds. Shit'eshaq is a pretty literal term if you think about it. So t'esh is the milt or the sperm of something, and that's usually what you're taking out of a salmon. And for some reason, it's not removing the eggs. Like that term gets associated with the guts, which is interesting. Shit'eshaq. But it really means gutting a salmon or a fish, but not anything that's not a fish. So then you see un, to put it back. So that's what that, so this is a suffix which means to put back. So if we say un, cha, aq, you'll see shun, like Halloween is coming up, so akulchet shun is a scary thing. And so these are some things as well. As folks learn more Tlingit, a lot of times they'll tell a story. Atchagu dewe kayatke chasatin. Kunachwe a Tlein, kutzin Tlein awe. And so at this point in the story, a lot of people will say, like, I saw this big old giant rat. And then they might say, atskani yewuti, or so. They're trying to use atskani as some sort of verb, or atskani is just like, ah! It's just like something you yell when something is scary. But then you could say, it was scary. And so that's when we say there's a verb for those things. And that one has shun. And there's a couple others that have shun or chun, or sometimes I think it is tsun, and it means it easily does that thing, or it's something that does that thing. So then with this knowledge, we go back to these and we see to restore confidence. So you have Yao Du Zihan, right? So that means to kind of be standing up, for someone to be standing, right? So that's what the Han is right there. So what that means is you could say Kotiya Yaudutsa Han. The totem pole was stood up. So this means for someone to stand someone up. Or like I could stand someone up if they're having a hard time for whatever reason, real tired, real kawashu, and I gotta stand them up, right? That would work. And so this means we restored them to a standing position, basically, like the literal interpretation. Well, not we, but people did. They were restored to a standing position. And so here, you have, it's probably yes and nak. And so then you get un on the end, which turns the underline K to an underline G. And then here you have like gai de nach, right? So here's singular, hun, plural, nach, just like we expect with standing verbs, right? So you have get de han, gai de nach. So here you'd have to say we're going to stand something up, whether you're saying literally, like we're gonna stand this house post up and build a new house. You would say yegachti sahan, right? And then you, if it fell down, you could say yegachti sahan, and we're gonna restore it to its standing position. And so with hich, you kind of get this one, which means to do or to move. And so this one is like getting back to normal. That seems like it's the right one. And so for me, the yakwahich means for something to happen, like especially like some kind of public thing, like a ku'ik or celebration. Sometimes I'll say that at the beginning of classes. It's going to start happening, right? So here, you might say, ach yakwaheiku yawahichen. So that's what I would expect is yawahichen. Ah,
Yakwaheyagu, Yakwahichen.
yeah, so yakwa would be, and here we do see yach in front of it. And so I guess, what is that? Oh, okay, so it's going to go, so maybe I would say, like, they're going to put my spirit back inside me, really is what we're sort of saying. Like, that would have to be probably the literal way we would want to say it. Ach yak qoheku, ach tuch yak qohichen. And then you could say, Hachagenya, right? Or the Kian Kao. Very big.
So, okay, let me try it. Ach, Yakwaheyagu, Dikian Kawuch, Yak,
Achtuch.
uh, can you write it?
Uh-huh. And Tzach Tleich, did you have a thought?
To go at this from a different angle, one of the old Tlingit reader books has a translation of the psalm. And so I'll work on typing in the line we're talking about.
Sheesh. And this is... Oh, anybody have a copy of Sneaky Sounds while we're thinking of things? Where is this? Is this...
There it is, down at page. So it looks like this translator came at it, as I see it, this is that particular line of restoring my soul is being given strength.
Yeah, giving a strong breath, is what or a strong life. Like, so chasek is breath or breathing, or life. So if you say ach chasegu, that's my life. And then ach chasegu chatzin, a jich, a ti. Okay.
Where did you get that?
Oh, this is
Soft Lake.
Yes.
Gusa Dach Ejiwa.
Tlein cha in the big cache of information, the Tlingit language uploads. Maybe Hune can put the link.
Yeah, and we should also be able to get to it. Hold on. Stop the share. Uh, yeah, I'll put a link in the chat and I'll also show you folks accessing stuff from the curriculum folder. So in the curriculum folder, if you go down to texts, this is where you'll find a whole bunch of the books that have been done. And so then if we go to Dowenhower, we should have Diruji Yanade right here. So I will copy the link.
Is that all on your website?
Well, you can get to this folder from the website, sure.
Yeah.
And just, there's a few spelling conventions that have changed, so just don't be alarmed if it's spelled different than what you might see in other places. And this is the first one they did.
Wow.
I think they had done the Chutz what by then though. But this was the first reader I think they did. So 1972.
Hey, there's my name,
Shana
Michael
Kate?
Michael Krause, Center 8. Oh, we saw that before, I think, in Nerds.
Yeah, we did.
So Duke, I can show you where it is sometime. If
Thank you.
Sure.
Geez.
And yeah, and the link is also in the chat, which folks can download later. But then, so that's also like when you translate stuff, there's going to be different ways to get there. And so, and it kind of depends too. Like when we were doing stuff for Jaqaitla, I was like, what does this even, what does it even mean? Because like, it's not like things that are like, especially like particular passages or songs, they're not always like really straightforward language, right? And so that one's not too unclear, but there were a couple, I can't remember what the one was, where I was like, what does it even mean in English? I don't really know. Like, what are we talking about? And so those are some things too where it's going to require some conversations. And same thing like when you folks are, because the King James Bible, one of the authors was Tlein, Bill Shakespeare. And so you get a lot of very poetic language, and sometimes trying to translate poetic language into indigenous language requires some conversations about like, well, what exactly is this saying? And then what do we want it to say? Because it's, and these are not right or wrong things, because there's all kinds of ways. Like, yeah, I remember there was something like, there was one version of a Bible that said like, you shall anoint yourself with oils. And then there was another version in that same passage that said like, put some perfume on, right? And so these things are always subject to how they get interpreted. And then going back to Hebrew, which is not that's not our Shagun language, but it's just a totally different language. But you go from Hebrew into English, and then it also gets reworked, by many different hands as they sort of reinterpret these things and continue to sort of put different takes on. And so it's fun stuff. But yeah, translation work that's a long game. And then sometimes you'll come back to things 10 years from now and you're like, why did I say it that way? I should have said it this way, right? So I think I like to say translation is forever, because some of it's never done. And there's always things to work on.
Okay, Lance, I have another question. In verse 4, thy rod and thy staff. Now, I didn't know the name for those ornate staffs that a lot of the men had in their hands on the 1904 Potlatch and Sitka photo.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. Let me look at my notes from this summer, because I know it depends on what, so again, like what type of thing we're kind of talking about. So for example, that staff, that raven, there's a whole bunch of them that replicate Naq'eqi Wutsaqa. which is the octopus tentacle staff that Raven used to pull the house in. And so
So
we
Utsaga is staff?
Utsaqa is a staff, and it's also just used for a cane as well. And so then you could say, now let me see, because I was wondering about sometimes they hold up those big ones and then everybody dances in under them, right? And so I was asking around, and then I think we finally just came up with a name for it. Let me look through my notes. Atlechtsaqa is what they were calling it. But it might be Atlechutsaqa. And then the ones, sometimes there's a specific one that a song leader holds, and that's Achitati Utsaqa. But it ends up being Wut, you have Wutsaqa on it. So you end up just saying like kind of whose it is, but I usually don't hear it getting any sort of relational suffix.
I was also thinking maybe I could say your spear and your paddle, because I didn't know what else to think.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it comes down to like what do those two, what are they talking about? Like a rod and a staff, like are those the same things? Or those are different things? And so those are also like there's a cultural context to all of this kind of stuff too, right? Like when you say the word staff, it kind of depends. Like if you're hanging out with Tlingit people all the time, you got one thing in mind, but if you just played if you play Dungeons and Dragons all the time, you might have a totally different thing in mind, like something like Gandalf would be walking around with, right? And so these things are going to depend, and then sometimes you have to sort of have conversations about what are these and what's the most appropriate translation. And this has been going on for a long, long time because there's a lot of Bible verses that they were translating with Taway being the sheep of the Lord, and all these elders are like, what are they doing with these mountain sheep? That's not gonna work. You can't tell them where to go. And so, but then they were changing that to what they do, and then that worked out a lot better because then they're like, oh, like some other kind of what's that thing? Because like that thing's not from here. The one I do.
So just an interesting idea looking at early Slavonic and the original Old Believer Orthodox, looking at some of the Aramaic transfer to early Russian that is prior to the new Russian. There were some good passages and it broke it down simpler. And then here's what they were getting at. And if there's some good writing on that, that's worth a look at too, early Slavonic, because that is still based in some of the languages that you used in modern Russian anymore too. And there's some good lines in there.
Yeah, and like a whole translation project would certainly be worthwhile. Like, the Book of John has been done, and so I know it's out there. But we might also find passages where they're like, oh, okay, well maybe we want this to be a little bit more specific than what we ended up with. So, okay.
Well, the reason I picked this was because when I was young, I had to memorize it. And when I already know something, then when I'm saying it in Tlingit, I just think, what's the English for this line? And then I try to do the Tlingit. And I thought rod and staff might be spear and paddle because they're the tools of a fisherman, whereas I think the rod and the staff were tools of a shepherd, and our culture is fishing. That's why I thought maybe paddle and spear.
Okay. So it says, according to Got Questions, the rod was a sturdy wooden stick used as a weapon to fight off wild animals who might have hoped to make an easy meal out of an otherwise defenseless flock of sheep. And I think the shepherd was, and then their staff. So Uska Wutsafa would work pretty. So you got a club and a staff.
Yeah, the staff with a hook that's for rescuing the sheep.
Oh,
So
wanna do kekai.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I-
who's,
Gaff 'em.
yeah, who's for crabapple wood, the club wood.
Yeah. That one's one of my favorites because there's only two that I know of where it's both a tree and a tool. And that's puts and tsaps.
Gonna
I
choose.
think I think there's so much about wood to learn.
Mhm.
You know, we have the different things about how wood works for fire. And there's that lovely word for oak
Oh,
that I think represents when they saw this wonderful hardwood that
yeah.
was,
Shluwo is the wood itself. Gun is like firewood, right? So if you say I'm going to use this type of wood, shluwo would be the right word. So chai shluwo, I'm going to work with yellow cedar wood, right? Not gun, because gun would be like just then it just gets into firewood. Okay.
Now, on Socrates' 23rd Psalm there, it says, E kukachajayi. What's that?
Where is it? That's
Your
an
rod and your staff. E kukachajayi ka I wutsa gayi.
kukachitjayi. It's something for bonking people on the head. Or for bonking, I don't think it's on the head. It's a people bonker. Or hitch. Hitch is to yeah.
I have a short question.
Ah,
For large flocks of birds migrating, do you use the word yeet? Yeech?
yes.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little different in Tesla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How
I
is
think Anya Tahashi says heech.
Hitch? That's it.
Mhm.
I got another short one, hopefully. Renee. I'm just gonna paste something in chat here. Just going back to day, eh? If I can. There we go. So it's in Tlingit and then English. But I was wondering what that day has confused me because it's at the end of a verb. And I guess if I look at the English, I kind of seeing it mean until or.
Oh, did you
But
hit? I don't
did,
see. I don't see it in the chat yet.
I see it, but maybe I need to hit return. Let me see. Oh, there you go. Okay, sorry. Okay, but
Yeah. So you can have this is where it does get confusing. Okay. So you can put a day right before the verb, already verbed, and then you can have a command verb, and then you can have a high tone day, and that means verb already, right? Like not today, right? You can also have verb day, and that's until, and you can have verb dach, and that is since, I guess since verb. I don't know how to say that. And then you have until verb. So you could, if you go back to, let me pull it from the chat and put it in here. So if we took this sort of thinking, and then we say we kagan chuhat aksha dachnachutukuchu de teteshtutin. It's like Shadanach. We went around the mountain until we couldn't see it. That's what it looks like.
yeah, I couldn't figure that out what that day was doing there, but
Yeah, it's sort of like, and it's a little bit like you get into these kind of logic puzzles because the languages do work differently. but like it's if that is pretty standard as far as being the opposite, because then we see things like yadak, khat, sati, dak, which is from the time I was a young boy, or I was a boy, whatever, right? Not necessarily young. So see, like from the time of the verb, and then this is like wutakuchte tutin. We did it until we couldn't see it, which is wild. Like that's really wild, because then we don't, again, like with some of these suffixes, we don't really see the verb changing a whole lot, but we do end up with wutakuch and then day, right? And that could be just because wutakuchte might be a little awkward, but there could be another time, like some other kind of marker that's going on in here. Okay.
And sheesh.
I also have a quick question. Masa hadua ka learning the Tlingit language saved my life, because the closest thing I was able to get to it was aga tsa achnigu we Tlingit yu chatangi adachat wusinech. And that one, I think, is kind of close, but that one kind of more speaks to sickness, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, I remember that when I was with Nora and I just said, that's, I just said our language saved my life, right? And she said, I'm sure I told you this already, but she said, me too. I was crazy. But yeah, and so, but you could also say, right? And so there's different ways to do that. And so whenever and these are getting into metaphors, like, so we talked a little bit about metaphors the other day, and there are different ways you can construct this, because I remember one of the first times I started thinking about this, I think it was something like this. It was probably like this. Oops. And so my gratitude killed me, right? It's a really over-the-top way of saying like how grateful you are. And then so what you have here is you have the conversion of a verb phrase into a noun, which is sometimes done just by changing the classifier. And then you put the ch on it to make it the subject of something. And so you could follow this model, and so you could say Tlingit. But I guess it depends too, because you can just say that the language saved me. That's a pretty straightforward way to say it. Right? Which I just got from Hausaneh, which was like, but what Selena was saying was like, this is what enabled us to survive as people. And so there's also other ways you can say that. And so you could say, or stu. I do think you go like this. So now we've converted my studying of Tlingit, but then you could also say Tlingit Huasaku. You probably do that as well. So my knowing Tlingit, and then you could say Tlingit Huasagugu. My mastery of Tlingit. But then again, like you gotta be careful here too, because you could end up sort of like accidentally bragging on yourself by saying like I've mastered this language. And so my studying of Tlingit, and then any one of these could, I think, take this. And then you could say Chatwusanech. Oops. And then Jidach is another, if this is saying like, this is turning it into a noun and making it into an agent, like it's the thing that does the thing, but there's other ways you could say it, right? And so the model I get from this was, I'd say, ye, I think it was ye jene ajidach chet wudechwet. I'm tired from working, right? And there are ways to say like something made me tired, but jidach as well works. Again, it's another metaphor because usually jidach is like someone hands you something, or that's what you're talking about. Like, this is for you from my mother. And so that jiyis and jidach can communicate a lot in a short period of time. Okay, these are solid questions.
So those last 4 lines, Tlingit language, studying it saved me. Tlingit, what's that second one and third one? The translation?
My knowing the Tlingit language saved me. My mastering the Tlingit language saved me. And so usually, and so I do think there is a difference. Like, I got into a mild disagreement with someone about this, where they said, "Oh, that elder said, "Yitoi- gwetli tuwa sugu tlingiti shakugu." They must have meant yisakubu. I was like, "What are you talking about? They're the elder. You translate what they said. Don't presume you know what they should have said." But I think to know Tlingit, for me, like this is, I hear it, I understand it. For me, this is, I know how to speak it. And for me, there is a difference there. And I think it's important for us to have goals, because a lot of people are going to do this one first and then this one second. But there are some people, to just be honest, who don't quite get to this part. And so that's what we're continually sort of talking through and working on, because there's a whole lot to it, right? It's a big old language. But then
what's that last line mean?
This one?
The one below it?
Oh, I'm tired from working. And so if we took these ones and we wanted to just get to the verb forms, so we take this off and we'll say llingit shtu chwad tle tu. And then you'd say llingit chwaseku. And then llingit chwashaguk. So those are the verb forms. So this is, I studied it, I know it, and I guess I know how to do it. It's not always mastery, right? But it's sort of like, maybe I know an awful lot about basketball. I could tell you, like, I could be a coach, I could do all the different things, but if you put me on the court, I stink, right? So, but, or, so there's a difference between knowing stuff and knowing how to do stuff, right? And so those are two different types of things. And it kind of depends on what you're talking about too. But generally, this is information and this is ability to do something. That's the difference between those two. And I remember, like, I heard some young people too, they're probably being taught this phrase, and they said, "Tlingit choshagug." And I was like, oh, okay. Right. And not to say, like, I don't want to frown on that, but just in terms of like, I know how to use the language, but I also think we need to be fostering a lot of confidence when it comes to Tlingit.
So could you put other nouns in front of that for like, I know how to do it?
Yeah.
Like an
Say,
action, activity.
I really know how to play basketball. I was using that example as a straight up lie to say I don't know how to play basketball. But yeah, so yeah, you could say that. And it could be all kinds of things, right? I know how to teach people. Right. And again, like, just think of the context. Is this a conversation between people? And it's not really bragging if you're, in the right situations. If you stood up in the microphone and started using a bunch of cheshaguk verbs, you might be calling those bad energies, that bad medicine might be coming your way. But, and so I think it's good too to just use these things too. How to build a house, how to, um, do whatever the thing is. And then that's what these things, like I know about it. I know how to do it. Okay.
Would it be correct? Because I remember I probably was one of those students because I remember saying in the beginning, like, Slinget, Yuchatangi, Chiegugank, Huashbuk.
Yeah,
So
works.
like, yeah, because you're saying it's not like cocky because you're only saying you know a little bit of it.
Well, I know how to do a little bit of it. Right. And that's a really fun one too. There was a Tlingit guy who worked at Costco probably 10 years ago. And he was kind of he was he's big guy. And then it was Zeus who said, "Hey, that guy works at Costco and knows Tlingit." And I was like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, Nora said so." I was like, "I'm gonna talk to him." And so he was like looking through my receipt. I thought about it real hard and I said, "Tlingit." And he stopped. He looked right at me. And then he went back to this thing. So, yeah, Chayegugenk is like, it's a good one. Like, Chayegugenk Hasaku Yahayukatangi, right? And it depends, again, it depends on the context, right? Someone you know really well, you can get away with a lot more. And sheesh. Okay.
So sorry, Lance,
That's okay.
if I were to say, Achaskewu, Hoshi, would I say Chachaskewu, Hoshi Gugu? Because it's possessed by I am saying, I know how to do it.
Well, yeah, you could. So there's different ways to do this, right? So with that one, just like hunting and fish, like those are such big things for our people that there's a noun for it, right? So you could say asqewu, whoops, hoshaguk. I know how to sing.
Gonna teach.
Go straight to the noun. And then, but you could also say, if you're getting a little fancy, right? A day. I know how people sing, right? So it just depends on what you're trying to communicate, right? And so as we're going from beginning to intermediate to advanced, we just keep expanding things and just saying like there's always more than one way to do something. It kind of depends on the context, right? Like if someone's like, we need some fish. Anybody know how to sing, right? Right? And so this, and you got some room right here. You throw a Chayegugenk in there to say, I know a little bit about it. Know a little bit how to do it. And you can say Kunach, right? And then, if you're really going to confidence town, you can say, I know all about it. I know, and I can really do it. I know it really well. Kunach, right? And then same thing too. You can say that one, they really know our language. Okay.
Cheese chetlikat yuhan. Yukatangi kayis. Kat akt. Khadatan. Khanwan. Gat gatunak gatunakch. Haslinket yukatangi wutuwatan. Cheese. Chasyakyayati. Oh,
Maybe katukinch again.
Gatukinch. Ayakawa. Cheese.
Okay, huh? Okay, we're almost done with this other thing. And then I got a new thing. Well, I got two new things for you. What am I going to do? Okay, let's do the first new thing before we try and finish the old thing. There are a few verbs that I think I might have there was like, there's always something, sometimes you're going to run into uncertainty, right? You're like, okay, well, how do these things work? Here is my theory on how these verbs work. And then we're going to use this to begin our transition after we finish the subjects, right? We did objects, we did subjects. We're going to do another one where we do them both at the same time. But I think the next step for us is probably going to be achtuasuku we perfective. I really want us to master the perfective, right? So we can see any verb, throw it in the perfective. And then we're going to master the future. And then we'll talk about the imperfective because you can't master it, you have to memorize it. So I guess memorization is the mastery of it. And just so you know, if you took dot out of here, that's the word for joke. A chuk yuchatunk is a joke. A chuk dot yuchatunk. It's talking about laughter. So coming back, this is the field test. I'm going to do this tomorrow with intermediate Tlingit as a way just to show them that perfective, imperfective, future are the three most important modes. Like you need those to talk. The other ones are also important. That's how you get to high level Tlingit, like storytelling, speeches. The ones who were asked to tell the big stories and to give this big speeches knew how to use all those other different can't, make it happen, so it could happen, so it doesn't happen, all of those. And we can learn how to do those. We got a whole other semester after this one. But I want us to make sure that we've got these ones pretty well down. So if I showed you a verb theme, you should be able to get it pretty accurate to perfective, imperfective, future. You might have to look up the imperfective. Okay. So coming back, we are going to go through this verb component thing, and we're going to look at every single thing that's on that verb component game, and we're going to make sure we know every single thing that's on there. Those are the components that are most essential to moving these things around, right? Beyond the act of memorizing a language is learning the parts and learning how the parts get put together and start interacting with one another. So this will be in some ways color-coded, but when we put it all together, it won't be color-coded. It'll just be straight text, and then there'll be color coding when we pull it apart.
Do you have an idea or strategy for when they combine and conjugate
Yes,
as colors go, like different
yes.
colors? Okay, yeah, wait, I'm
What you'll see is there'll be a red color. It'll go when I pull it apart. It'll go red when it disappears. It'll go orange when it combines with something else. So that's my selected color coding for. I'm running out of colors because we got so many things, and start using like mauve and burnt ember or whatever. Okay, so
Definitely a rule book, like
yeah,
a book just on verb rules.
that's what we're trying to get to. Is like when this thing meets that thing, that's the one that has to go, right? So there is a pecking order to this thing, right? And some of these things are like, I'm the alpha component. When I'm around, everybody else contracts. I never contract. So we do have some bossy pieces in there, and we'll see which ones those are. Yeah is pretty bossy, and so is tu. They cannot contract. And right? Ha can. Okay, we'll get to that though. We'll get to that. So okay, so we have an imperfective. Just to sort of go over this, this is the term we use to say doing it, is that way, is located there. Those are the three sort of ways that this is used, right? It's not about time, right? These are not time-based things, but there are the only three verbs that can have an imperfective is an act, a position, and a state. Motion verb and event verb cannot have an imperfective. They will not have an imperfective. So it doesn't need anything in the conjugation prefix. So there's nothing this is the easiest way to have an object and a subject, which is why the love verb, that one works really well. We're going to work with that one to change the object and subject because there's nothing in between them. The classifier for the act and the position verbs will always be minus I. So that's why you say chacha, I'm eating it. Because it only goes plus I when it has indeed happened or it potentially is happening, right? Only 2 times it goes plus I. So that means a state verb, every state verb in the imperfective is plus I. You're gonna have ya, sh, se, she. Must be those, you can have the plus D options as well, okay? The stem is the unpredictable part. We don't know what the vowel is going to be. When we say stem, we're always talking about the vowel right there in the stem, right? The only ones you can really predict are the invariable ones. Khan is always short and high, doesn't change. Good? The perfective. We say perfective, and that means let's look at this verb in terms of whether or not it did. Okay? Whether or not it happened. So that's, you can just have yes or no, positive or negative. So we're dealing with the positive here. We'll get to the negative. And so this means it did it, if someone did it, it became that way, or it happened. It will always have y. It must have y in the prefix, but that's the only one that gets activated. The classifier must be plus I. That means you have just, you start to get some things in there, but there's certain patterns. It has to follow these certain patterns, right? And that's where we start getting the hua and the iya and yi, these other things. The stem is predictable, but you do have 5 options here, okay? So the way the options work is if it's open and a 0 conjugation, like cha. When you look up that verb to eat something, it says 0 act. And then there's no consonant on the end. It ends with a vowel. That will be long and high every single time. Every perfective open 0 verb will be long and high. If it's not 0, it's going to be long and low. Huacha, huata, right? It is absolutely 100% predictable. If it's closed, which means it ends with a consonant, the zeros will be short and high. Everything else will be long and low. Whoops, let me get rid of that number 1. I changed my approach. The only exception is if the verb is marked high in the theme. Like when you look up catching, shot, and you see that high tone on it, it does not go low. So that's the case where it would be long and low, but this verb does not have a low version.
This chart doesn't say it matters what type of verb, like action or motion.
Doesn't matter. That, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Any of them can have a perfective.
Okay.
Good question. Okay, and we'll go over this. We'll go over a whole bunch of examples, and you will learn how to build that prefix. And the big thing with the prefix is like the subject and the classifier. Those become the most important parts. Those will affect how it gets put together. The object sits there and it will affect it, but it's way, way easier to predict what's going to happen. And so these are marked, right? So when we look up cha, we see 0 act, right? Open 0. It's going to be long and high. Na, ka, and qa. We look up here, open, na. That's going to be long and low. We know that, right? That is, as we sort of start to figure out how these structures work, how these modes work, we become really good predictors of what's going to happen. Closed ends with a consonant. Oops, that's a 0 act. What a bad example. Okay, I'll find a different one. It's a 0 one. Oh, okay, I'll do it some other time. Oh, I know. Nuck, right? Because, okay, anyways. I'll fix it. No, that's not okay. No, Januck. Okay, yeah. Jiwanuck. There it is. Okay. So, it's a work in progress. But then you're going to have na, ga, and qa, right? So au de gan. So this one is going to be long and low, right? Huahash. It's absolutely predictable. Au de gan. There's absolutely a reason those are both long and low, and they will be in the perfective. So jinak, if I know that's the command form for drop it, then I know, oh, the perfective is going to be jehwanak. I dropped it, right? Okay, so if it's marked high right here, so this is na to donate something, right? So I could say, oh, I gotta change that too. I should say plus, sorry. Just in terms of how we document this stuff. I pulled these, I didn't pull them from the dictionary I was working on. So there's a couple things that are different in the ways. Someday maybe we'll all reach, there's supposed to have this meeting next month maybe where we try to reach consensus on a bunch of things. I feel like it's going to be a big intellectual brawl. That's okay. But we'll go over this, right? The idea here is just to say it's all predictable. We just have to learn what these systems are and what these structures mean. And that means we have to talk to each other about this stuff. Because if you go walk around the street, just go into like your grocery store and just say, hey, do you know if this is a zero conjugation verb? And we're like, what are you talking about? And so, but the other thing too, as we learn this stuff, never make the mistake that you know more than someone because you know these structures, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff to this, right? Like I was sitting with Nora and I said, yeah, undergun. She said, yay, undergun. So she knew, right? And I was like, because it's conjugation, right? But we'll get to all of those things. The future has the most parts, some of the most parts in the prefix. It has a couple of tricky things. I guess there's one thing I didn't mark on here for the future, which is, let me just fix it right now. Try to. So that means, what did I forget? Some of you have done this before.
Probably the preverb.
There, yeah, K.
Yeah. So then, let's see how we're going to do this. So 0 and, well, I guess I only need to mark two things, right? Ga will have to have K, and qa will have to have yay. And these are constants, right? So this is another thing where, like, as you learn verbs, like sometimes you might catch yourself just randomly throwing K in front of it or yay, because like, I don't know, I hear this sometimes. But that's why you say K kwa K. And once you hear K in front of it, you're like, oh, that's got to be ga conjugation, right? Ye aguchtagan. It's going to be sun shining, right? So again, it comes down to the conjugation prefix. 0 and na don't need anything in front of them. Okay, so for the future, it will gonna do it, will be that way, will happen. It always has to have ga, u, and qa. They come in that order. That makes it actually really predictable. If you take this letter A out, which will happen quite a bit, this will turn into a K. And that's why you have kukwa or kukki, right? Because these things are interacting. And in the future, this irialis right here, it'll go away quite a bit. It always has to be minus I because it hasn't happened. Even if you say it's gonna happen, it hasn't happened. And that's what the plus I tends to mark. And, whoops, it always has to be long and high. So let's see some of these things in action, right? So we're going to sort of forget about all those rules. And we're just going to look at how these verbs kind of work, okay? So the first one is laughing. And there is one version that has an object, has a subject, It's a zero classifier, zero conjugation verb. That means when we get to the perfective, we should expect it to be short and high, and it will be. There is an imperfective, and the imperfective stem variation for this is long and low. So once we know that, we can use this verb so and these are all third persons, right? So we see this 0, 0, 0, 0. This could change, right? So I could say khat ishuk, you're laughing at me. Or I could say ikhashuk, I'm laughing at you. Now, this particular verb doesn't imply any sort of cruelty or anything like that. It's just, but when you have this form with the object there, it does mean to laugh at something, right? So here you've got khashuk, tushuk, ishuk, yishuk, ashuk, has ashuk, dushuk. Those are all the ways, and so when we go through, we see kha, tu, I, y, 0, 0, du. Those are the ways the subject can change. When the subject goes third person, which is the 0 marker, the object must switch to You can't have those two zeros, right? So that's what triggers the switch over to But when it goes to du, it switches back to 0. Classifier 0 all the way down. We also see fully in play, tu goes long because there's no vowel in the classifier. I goes long because there's no vowel in the classifier. The rest all stay the same. You will see pretty commonly in the storied Naish verb dictionary, de written as do, but there's no long version of de. They didn't always hear the short vowels. Okay, so this is laughing at something. So to say laughing, you lock up the object with ut. This is a very common, there's quite a few verbs that do this. Atcha, eating something. Atana, drinking something, right? We did this with another verb. This one means just laughing, right? So there's differences to these things, right? I was laughing at it, or I was laughing, right? So here, the only thing that changes is we put ut in front of it, and then we don't have ashuk because that object has become ut. And I'll put this thing up so it'll be on our page.
This is really good because it's so opposite to English thinking.
Right.
It's like laughing at it, but there's nothing in the verb in sing it.
Right. So like in English, you have to add the object there, right? Laugh at it. For sing it, you have to lock up that object because it's already there.
In the ut.
Yeah, you start with an object and then you lock it up with ut.
You can't put anything else in there. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
So once you have ut, then it's the other thing to remember is it always goes has ut.
Has ut.
Very common to try and put ut outside of the has, but it doesn't work that way. Has achuk. And same with when you come back to this one. Has chachuk. They're laughing at me.
Now, I remember you told us that when we were doing this last week, but why again is it that we have to have a hus outside of ut?
Yeah, because when we go back, hus is a preverb, and the preverbs are always before the verb itself. The object is part of the verb, although some of them drift over into the preverb. But I would still say, let's just think of them as objects, because there can't be anything between them and the verb itself. You can't put anything between them. And ut is an object pronoun. That is an area of confusion. Sometimes for me, I'll say things like chat has shuk. I just do that sometimes, right? And those are things to just monitor and then just switch it around. Like has is like I guess these object pronouns are like a moon. And then has is like the next planet over, right? It's like Mars or something. I don't know.
Renee,
Ah,
would it be reasonable to think of has not, I was thinking of it as a plural pronoun, but would it be more reasonable to think of it as a pluralizer
yes, it is a
rather than a pronoun?
and it's a human pluralizer, but sometimes it works for non-humans as well. Okay, sheesh. So this,
Quick question, sorry. So I'm just wondering, like, I always hear like kunach shugu, and is that the noun version of this one? Because then it changes it right at the end.
so chishuk means to make someone laugh. So I'll have to add that one. I don't think I added that one on here. So you could say, chat chishuk, you made me laugh. And then shishuku means funny. It's something that makes people laugh. Chashishuku would mean makes good jokes. But yeah, that's a good question, right? And so that's going to change. Now we've changed the classifier, and it's a wonderful example of saying, oh, it's not just laughing, someone's making people laugh. So then, we see what happens when we throw at on there. We can make another change to this verb. We can add the thematic prefix ya, and now we've got smiling. Okay, and so the way I got some clarification from this goes a lot of appreciation to Vesta Dominics, who made this, she made this little book called Little Readings in Tlingit. It's a wonderful little book. And then in there it says like, who are they smiling at? Right? And adusa, and then it says yashuk, right? I think maybe it was yawashuk, but anyway, so this is also, everything is exactly the same. There's an object, there's a subject, but there's ya in between them now. That will matter. That will matter. Still a zero classifier, still a zero verb. Still going to be shuk. And if you are an inland speaker, you might be saying shok, right? Just because of that underlined K is going to push that O vowel to do that U vowel. So here, instead of chashuk, you've got yachashuk, yatushuk, yishuk, yaishuk, ayashuk, hasayashuk, yadushuk. And this is still smiling at a thing or a person, right? So again, like, this has to do with like looking at someone and smiling at them, right? So then we should be able to do the exact same thing. Throw ut in front of it, now we've just got smiling. We have kicked the object, we have locked up the object, and not every verb does this, but some of them do, to say like, oh yeah, you can have one without the object there. And now you're not smiling at someone, you're just smiling, right? Because then now the rumor mill doesn't start spinning as fast, right? Oh, they're just smiling, right? So here, at yachashuk, at yatushuk, at yishuk, at yaishuk, at yashuk, has at yashuk, at yadushuk. But this does affect some of those ways that these are interacting, right? In this case, you just throw a Y there. You go from ishuk to yishuk. And what's wild is when we look at, like, there's one with a K, and what we're going to do is we're going to change this Y to a K. And it's going to be the exact same all the way down.
So what would you call the ya part?
It's a thematic prefix.
Okay, so is that like
It's a face.
vertical versus face? Yeah, vertical surface. Yeah,
Face
okay.
vertical surface.
Ah,
And we're going to
okay.
change it to ka, and we'll see what happens to the meaning. So here comes the ka. So now we have an object. We have ka, which is the horizontal surface or on something. But now this is making fun of something. So now this isn't the fun kind of laughter, right? I mean, it could be fun for you while you're in it, but it's also mean, right? And so this is the one where, like, to make fun of, to deride, to laugh at in a way that's kind of means it does happen sometimes, right?
I don't know what families you come from, but that's who we are. And gee, around all my uncles and stuff, this is what happens. You come there, you better put on your tough skin because it's going to happen. And if you cry about it, they're going to make even more fun of you.
Yeah, you get some of these like, we tease because we love you, right? But if we go, so if we like just clicking back and forth, so see kachashuk, katushuk, kishuk, kaishuk, akashuk, hasakashuk, kadushuk. When we go back 2 slides, all those K's will change to Y's. They are identical all the way down, right? So sometimes we are changing a single letter, right? So we see the pattern stay the same, that one letter changes, right? So we do, this shows you just how predictable all of this stuff is. You just got to keep this stuff in your mind, like what happens when they run together. 0, ka, ha, 0, right? There's not a lot, right? So the 0 doesn't count. Once we get to 3, we start having to contract a little bit, which will happen if we put it in a perfective. So now that perfective marker goes in between the object and the subject, right? And so this is it. Always it has a very standard operating procedure. But there are some things that happen that we're going to look at with the next slideshow after this, which is this thing is going to jump over cha, and it does it every time. Every time you and cha meet, you jumps over, and you get hua. And so in this case, you plus cha plus ya gets you hua, long, with those 2 A's. It's a 0 verb, so it's short and high in the perfective. Absolutely predictable. Hua shuk, watu shuk, iya shuk, yi shuk, or if you're in the inland, ying shuk, awa shuk, hus awa shuk, wadu shuk. Totally predictable. The other thing here, like if we look at how these prefixes are built right here, if we change this verb to something else with the ya, or no, there's no ya on there. So cha, hua cha, watu cha, iya cha, yi cha, awa cha, has awa cha, wadu cha. Right? So now the only thing that changes is the root, right? I guess the other thing too, I do believe Tetson's doing just fine holding on to this sound, which is this nasalized gamma sound. For you coasties, don't lose this second Y. Don't lose, because you got to go yi shuk. It's got to go yi shuk. Just has that little sort of bumpy ride to get there. It's real easy to go yi shuk. Gonna chish hat yadi, right? That's a little too, you're skipping something. Gonna chish hat yadi. We were talking about this last night. What kinds of
Oh,
things the teachers need to control? What's
what
that?
would you what would you consider talk on? Any outie?
They're tweeners.
Yeah, correct.
They just stand on the mountaintop, I guess, because
Correct.
they'll say they'll use that O sound, and then some of the old speakers had this gamma still, but it's trending in a different direction. So, but
I just want you to know, I'm still voting for the yang.
oh yay!
I am. I'm a supporter. I'm definitely a supporter.
Yeah,
You're,
correct.
I call it Shawaki Nyai because I think that's a hilarious name for it. It means a Y with eyes. Shawaki. But I initially call it Shawaki Y, but that would be W-A, high tone A-A-Y. But maybe we got to put the on the end. Shawaki Y. Okay. And yeah, we can all move back to it. It's not hard. So if we put ut in front of it, the only thing that usually changes here, because ut ends with a consonant, so it's not going to trigger additional contraction. So it does affect this one though. So we go from awashuk and has awashuk to uwashuk. So that is something that changes. Because it's 0, we end up with iya and uwa. But that's only if something happens to sort of close this object, because we will end up with awa, right? There's no difference between 0, na, ka, and ka if there's also an object, right? Because it has to be a. And then once you get that, it sort of overrides that little change. But if this was a na conjugation, like you would say yi ta, and you would say wu ta, not uwa. You only get uwa and iya with a 0. So there are these things that are exceptions, right? In the book of exceptions. This is one of the ones we have. Okay. At khashuk, at watuashuk, at iyashuk, at yingshuk, at uashuk, has atuashuk, at waduashuk.
Renee, you said it changes because the object slot is locked up. Is that what you said?
Yes. And it has something that ends with a consonant. If this was laughing at, for example, right here, like if this changed to laughed at y'all, ye wushuk. Right. I actually probably just be, yeah, ye. No, I think it'd still be ye wushuk. Okay. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. Good question. I have to try it. Now we got to move it in a whole bunch of different ways. Okay. So if we add the thematic prefix on here, Yahwa, Yautua, Yia, Ya Yi, or Ya Ying, Ayawa, Hus Ayawa, Yaudua. So with the perfective, like just like we saw earlier, like we'll change this Y to a K. That same, we're going to say Yahwashuk, Kachwashuk, Yautuwashuk, Kautuwashuk, Yi Yashuk, Ki Yashuk, Ya Yi Shuk, Ka Yi Shuk, a Yawashuk, a Kawashuk, Hasayawashuk, Hasakawashuk, Yauduashuk, Kauduashuk. And that goes from smiling at someone, to making fun of someone. So the ut doesn't change this one a whole lot. Because once you have this thematic on there, you're not going to have iya and uwa, because there's a vowel in front of it. So it's going to just sort of say, okay, back to normal, back to normal. So then just like these are the same all the way down. I'll put this up there so you guys can have it, practice it, take a look. Oh, I'm getting is that a technical foul or timeout? Okay.
I think I just lost it about 2 iterations ago. So I'm just saying I'm full. It's all the way up to here. But these are good.
Okay. So I won't go over them in as much detail, but there's the K, right? It's the same. But once you look at these, right? So the whole idea is just to say this laughing and smiling and laughing at and smiling at, they're slightly different verbs, right? But it does present a predictable pattern. And then we can build like the perfectives, and we can also build futures, but we'll leave that for another day in the future. It's right there to look at. And so this was fun because a lot of these sort of ideas are born out of being in the language nest. I'm not in there as much as I'd like to be, but when I'm in there, I'm listening and I'm just sort of hearing like what it's like to be in a place where the language is living and is the primary language. And then I thought, well, I need to sort of make sure that we're understanding how these slight variations of these verbs work. And then also, it's a good way to just sort of look at this stuff and just say, there's a lot of moving parts in here. Ga, uqa. We're going to talk next about how does that affect things? What happens? And it will, because here now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Has to contract, has to start contracting. But it does so in a very predictable way. The future is the most predictable verb. So now you all be able to predict the future accurately. Okay, let's get fortune cookies and sheesh. Let's see. I'll let you know about next week. Next week is the first Wednesday of the month, but I will also be out of town. We'll still have class, but I'll be in Santa Fe. Be a little warmer than
Okay.
here. There's a dual language conference. That should be pretty good.
Ooh. Mexico's awesome for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I didn't smile, or they didn't smile for those stoic people.
So here, and we can, okay, we can't, whoops, hold on. So let me do this. So here's our perfectives, right? For smile, we'll just, I guess we'll do the, yeah, with that. So what would happen is you'd have clash out here. Oops. Going all over the place. Clash. But now that can't be the only thing that changes. But what will change is, well, we got to throw clash here, which would be green. Hold on. Now you get to see how these things happen. So now, and I'll change that to clash. Keep your color. There we go. So now we got clash. What else do I have to do? Anybody know? There's 3 more.
Oh. Oh,
The plus I minus I thing.
Oh yeah, there we go.
yeah.
So what's that going to become? I forget.
Minus.
But what's it going to be?
Oh, damn.
0.
Sakit. Okay. Yep.
Well,
Now we got 2. It's our go home key.
Maybe stem variation.
yes, the stem goes long and low.
Yeah, well, down to 1.
And now there's another one. Oh.
Cheerios.
Yes.
Which usually just gets absorbed, right? And so what you end up with, get rid of one of those A's. So this one doesn't change a whole lot. You drop an A because that second A is the ya classifier. I didn't smile. Okay.
So I got a kind of unrelated but related to language question.
Okay.
Did you make that Google map for the Occoquan territory? Do you have that overlay by chance, and can I use it?
I don't know. Because the only reason I don't know, I do have, there is a different one I made in this another program called CartoDB, which I'm happy
Ooh,
to
that
share.
would be better. Oh,
Uh,
you have that map?
UAS also has a bunch of mapping data.
Well, so if it's okay, I'll come to class Monday early, 15 minutes early. And if I can get that overlay, I've got a demo to show where I'm at with my Minecraft project.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But it would be really helpful to have the overlay because the world I have now is so big, it sometimes doesn't work good.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's pretty much 3/4 of South Finkatani.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and so there's a bunch of that data, and we're going to be doing some classes to create more things. So, okay, let me.
Is there something we need to prepare for Monday?
Yeah, what do you guys want to do? We're supposed to do Conversation Mondays. Anybody want to lead Conversation Monday?
I will if nobody else will.
Let's see. So we'll be in Qukahadis.
Askane,
Say it again.
Askane, Gary.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, it'll be okay. Let's do Halloween themed conversation. Prepare something to say, whatever you want. We've been talking about full skulls and empty skulls, which was kind of fun. So yeah, let's do Halloween-based stuff. Just put together as much stuff as you can. Talk about things, and think about I guess the context would be, think about someone you know real well, and what would you talk about with them when it comes to Halloween? Naqtatiyagi, or Atskaniyagi, or what was the other one we had? Kahagu Yagi, Skeleton Day.
I heard Agnes Lahash say Siguwu Halloween. Kind of cute.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. And then we'll converse for a while. I will still be on Akwan Ani, so I'll be in the same spot. Probably from here again, and then Wednesday's class I'll be on the road. Cheesh, Johan.
Sheesh.
Renee,
Ah,
I have a comment about the graphics that you're presenting with the verb parts.
ooh.
Some of those, well, I'm sitting here on a screen, long ways away from you. My screen might be smaller than yours. The two-tone background doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
Because you're using light colors for your different verb parts. And if the background is at all colored, it starts to interfere with the legibility of the verb parts, particularly when the color of the verb part is somewhat similar, is not in high contrast to the color of the background. So I would recommend plain white background all the time.
Back to white. Yeah.
Also, again, relating to the colors that you're using and legibility, if you could darken most of those colors by a few degrees, they would probably be more legible. I mean, you don't want them to all blend into blackness,
Yeah.
but you want to maximize the contrast between the background, the different colors with each other, like that, because otherwise, especially as you keep putting more colors in here, which I understand, it's just going to become mush. And part of the difficulty is that looking at things on a screen is very different from looking at things in print. And most computer printers tend to darken up the colors more than the screen does.
Right. Cheesh.
Cheesh.
Johan.
Sheesh.
Yeah. And at some point, the color codes that you're using, I'd love to have them described by RGB or something.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea.
So I'm not guessing in my own applications.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I'm still trying to get to the right shapes
They
because
have to be perfect before you do that.
that's differentiation between them, but then also still being able to see them. So, yeah.
Just add to that, the XML stuff I was talking about before in Dublin Core, you can program that in the metadata.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. Someone asked me about the Tlingit word for family, and I wrote ach in ach,
Mm-hmm. And so,
but I also heard ach kun ian, ach tach ian.
so I think technically Achunkian would be the ones on my clan. So
Okay.
fellow ravens. Achtakian would be my birth siblings.
Wait,
And then
Achunki is same clan.
yeah, Achin Ag would be my immediate family.
Okay. That explains a little bit better for me. Gulchish.